Back in the spring I made a video about planting blueberries. And because blueberries like an acidic soil, I talked about various ways you could bring down the pH of your gardening soil. And one way I mentioned was to use pine needle mulch. Now I heard back in one of the comments from MrChipGardener, who has a YouTube channel as well. And he said actually pine needles don't bring down the soil pH. And he gave me links to two sources, one from Washington State University and one from the Forest Industry Council. And because this is quite different from what I had heard in the past, I decided to ask Stephen Legaree for his thoughts on the topic. Stephen is not only a biologist, but he also has extensive experience working with the boreal forest in Canada. So I thought I'd ask Stephen to appear on video today to answer some of my questions about pine needles and soil acidity. So to start off, Stephen, do pine needles bring down the soil pH?
What a great question, Patrick. So I'm standing here in the boreal forest of Canada in order to answer your question. Pine needles do not actually make soil acidic. They are themselves acidic. However, this is a common misconception. Even universities like the University of Cornell makes reference to the fact that pine needles cause acidity in soil. That's incorrect. Although pine needles themselves have a pH of about 3.5, they don't decay and transfer that to the parent material. By the time they are decayed enough to transfer anything, they're at a neutral pH of 7.
Okay, but if pine needles don't increase acidity, why is it that pine forest soils are usually more acidic?
Well, that's a very interesting question, Patrick. In fact, you're correct. The soils in the boreal forest are acidic, but it's not because of the pine needles themselves. The pine needles are acidic on the tree, but what happens is they fall to the ground and they don't transfer that acidity at all. Now, the boreal forest characteristically has a very large canopy. And what that canopy does is it means not a lot of this beautiful sunlight actually makes it through. So we have a dense canopy. High volumes of rain also happen in this area, which means we're limited in the microbial activity that occurs within the soils, and decomposition happens very, very slowly. With the increased precipitation and slow decomposition, what happens is the water moves through the column very slowly. A major feature here in the boreal forest is bogs and fens, which are characteristically defined as where water either stays or moves exceptionally slowly through the system. And as that water leaches through that initial A horizon, so the organic on top, what it does is it takes with it a lot of the buffering capacity of most soils. In return, the longer that water stays in contact with the parent material below that, it releases acidic elements, meaning that top organic material ends up being acidic. And it's not at all due to the pine needles that fall and decompose as part of that.
What if I were to say mix the pine needles into the soil and possibly speed up the decomposition process? Would that help in the transfer of the acidity to the soil?
What a great question. Even if you combine the pine needles into the soil itself, it simply doesn't break down fast enough to transfer any of that acidity to the surrounding soils.
Well, that was very interesting, Stephen. Thank you so much for taking your time to share your expertise on this topic. I think this is something that's going to generate some discussion, so I hope to hear from viewers in the comment section below as to what your thoughts are on the topic of pine needles and soil acidity. Well, that's all for now. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, remember, you can change the world one yard at a time.